My husband secretly stole my credit card details and went to Europe. But every transaction alerted the FBI. Imagine waking up to find out your husband has stolen your credit card and disappeared to Europe with $50. Oh, of your money. That's exactly what happened to me. But here's the twist: he had no idea he just walked straight into a trap. By the time he landed in Dubai, his entire world was about to collapse. No money, no escape, and no way out. Stick around because this is the ultimate revenge story you don't want to miss. I adjusted my glasses, exhaling slowly as the numbers on the screen blurred together. It was late, well past midnight, but I wasn't tired. Not really. Exhaustion had stopped meaning anything a long time ago, replaced by something sharper, something that kept me wired even when the rest of the world was fast asleep. The apartment was too quiet. The kind of silence that didn't feel right, like the air before a storm. I knew that feeling well. It had settled over my marriage months ago, the eerie calm of something rotting beneath the surface. Pushing back from my desk, I rubbed my temples. A dull ache had been building at the base of my skull all night, but I ignored it. My focus stayed locked on the spreadsheet in front of me. Numbers, transactions, dates. Pattern recognition was second nature to me, spotting inconsistencies, following digital trails. It was what made me good at my job, what kept me one step ahead of fraud before it even happened. And yet, somehow, I'd failed to see the biggest fraud of all, the one sleeping under my own roof. A flicker of movement caught my eye, not in the room but in the hallway. A faint glow slipped beneath the door of Jordan's office. My stomach tightened. That door should have been shut. He should have been asleep, but he wasn't. I rose quietly, stepping barefoot across the wooden floor, my pulse kicking up with every step. I wasn't sure what I expected to find: an innocent explanation, maybe. But deep down, I already knew. The door wasn't fully closed. I nudged it open just enough to see inside, and there he was, hunched over my laptop, my personal laptop, the one he was never supposed to touch. His face was bathed in the cold glow of the screen, fingers moving quickly, his phone propped up beside him, camera lens aimed directly at the monitor. A chill crept up my spine. He was taking pictures. Screenshots of something: my bank accounts, my security details. The realization hit like a gut punch. He was stealing from me. My nails dug into my palms as I stepped back. Every instinct screamed at me to confront him, to demand answers, to unleash every ounce of fury burning inside my chest. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I turned and walked back to my desk, my mind already moving 3 steps ahead. If Jordan thought he was getting away with this, he was dead wrong. The next morning, I played my part perfectly. Coffee brewing, light conversation. I even kissed him on the cheek as he scrolled through his phone, pretending not to notice the way he avoided my eyes. He was smug, relaxed, convinced he had pulled it off. But by the time he boarded his first-class flight booked on my dime, I would already be 5 steps ahead, and he wouldn't have a clue what was waiting for him. I sat at the kitchen table, stirring my coffee, watching the steam curl into the air. Everything felt normal, deceptively so. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft patter of Jordan's bare feet against the tile as he strolled in, stretching like he'd actually done something worth being tired over. His hair was tousled, his shirt wrinkled, his entire demeanor relaxed, like a man without a single worry in the world. It made me sick. He had no idea. I glanced at him over the rim of my mug, forcing a small smile. Late night? He barely looked up as he poured himself a cup of coffee. Yeah, he muttered, rubbing a hand through his hair. Just couldn't sleep. Ended up watching some random videos. Liar. I nodded as if I believed him. As if I hadn't stood in the hallway last night watching him steal from me. As if I hadn't spent the last 6 hours setting the perfect trap. I had barely slept, but it didn't matter. Adrenaline had carried me through. The sheer rage of betrayal had sharpened my mind into something lethal, something dangerous. Jordan had made a mistake, a critical, irreversible mistake, and now he was about to pay for it. I took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the moment. He had no clue that his so-called perfect crime was already crumbling around him. He didn't know that every transaction he made was now being tracked, that every charge sent an automatic alert straight to my phone. He didn't know that, while he was sleeping soundly, I had called the bank, flagged my own card for fraud, and rerouted every notification to my private line. He thought he was getting away with it. He was dead wrong. I set my mug down with a quiet clink, watching as he scrolled through his phone, smirking at whatever he was reading. Probably a confirmation email, a first-class flight, 5-star hotel, expensive suits. Oh, he had plans, big, extravagant plans, and I was going to let him walk right into them. I glanced at the clock. If my timing was right, his first transaction would hit in about 20 minutes. Right on schedule. Jordan suddenly looked up, flashing me a lazy smile. "You know," he said, stretching, "I've been thinking, we should take a vacation. Just the two of us. Somewhere nice." My stomach twisted not with nerves, but with satisfaction. He was testing the waters, laying the groundwork for his excuse. When I noticed the missing money, he would spin it into something romantic. A surprise getaway. A gift. He'd make me feel guilty for questioning him, manipulate me into believing I had overreacted. I almost laughed. He really thought he could play me? "That sounds amazing," I said softly, playing along. "Where were you thinking?" He grinned. "Maybe Europe? Paris, Milan. Somewhere with history, you know?" Oh, I knew. I knew that in less than 24 hours, he'd be sitting in a luxury hotel suite halfway across the world, thinking he had won. And I knew that, by the time he tried to check out, his card would be declined, his accounts frozen, and his perfect little scam would crumble into dust. I had already made sure of it. I stood, leaning down to press a soft kiss to his cheek. "You always have the best ideas." He chuckled, wrapping an arm around my waist. "Gotta treat my wife right." The irony nearly knocked the air out of me. As I pulled away, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The first charge had gone through. Game on. I excused myself, stepping into my office and shutting the door behind me. My hands were steady as I unlocked my laptop and pulled up my banking dashboard. There it was, $5,200 at a high-end boutique in Miami. Then another $12,800 for a first-class flight to Dubai. And another. Thousands of dollars disappearing in minutes. He wasn't wasting time. Good. Leaning back in my chair, I exhaled slowly. Let him keep going. Let him dig himself deeper. I wasn't going to stop him. Not yet. I was going to watch him burn. I picked up my phone and dialed the one person who would understand. Rebecca answered on the second ring. "Tell me you're finally leaving him." "Oh, it's better than that," I said, a slow smile spreading across my lips. "Jordan just stole my credit card." There was a pause. Then laughter. "You're kidding. I wish." I scrolled through the transaction history, watching as another $3,000 charge hit. A resort booking, perfect. But here's the fun part: he used the dummy card. Rebecca let out a low whistle. "The one flagged for fraud detection?" "Exactly. That's honestly impressive in the dumbest way possible." I chuckled, but my eyes stayed locked on the screen. Another fraud alert popped up. Jordan had just upgraded his hotel suite. Rebecca's tone shifted. "You want me to get the paperwork started?" "Yes. I want everything in place before he even knows what's happening." "You got it. I'll draw up the divorce petition and start logging evidence. We'll have everything airtight." I exhaled, gripping my phone tighter. "And I want the FBI looped in." Rebecca's laughter returned, darker this time. "Now that's a hell of a plan." I ended the call, staring at the long list of transactions. I had spent too long cleaning up Jordan's messes, making excuses for his lies, forgiving his recklessness. No more. I was done! That night, I lay in bed, listening to the steady rhythm of Jordan's breathing beside me. He was fast asleep, dreaming of his new life, of the money he had stolen, of the luxury he thought he was about to enjoy. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. By tomorrow, he'd be gone. By tomorrow, he'd think he had won. By tomorrow, his entire world would come crashing down. And me? I'd be sipping champagne, watching it all unfold. So, my husband thought he was living the dream: first-class flights, five-star hotels, designer shopping sprees. But what he didn't know? Every single charge he made was triggering real-time fraud alerts straight to the authorities. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Do you think he figured it out before it was too late? Or did he wake up in a nightmare of his own making? Comment 111 if you think he saw the trap coming. Or woo 2 foot if you think his world was about to crumble. The morning Jordan left, I felt something I hadn't in years: clarity. No second guessing, no lingering doubts, just the steady pulse of certainty beneath my skin. He strolled into the kitchen, suitcase in hand, sipping the coffee I had made, completely oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. "You sure you don't want to come?" he asked, flashing that signature grin, the one he always used when he wanted to manipulate me into something. A spontaneous trip could do you some good. I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. Tempting, the first said, stirring my coffee lazily, masking the satisfaction curling in my chest. "But I've got too much work. You go ahead and enjoy yourself." "Oh, I will," he said with a smirk, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek before grabbing his bags. I let it happen, let the moment play out as if I were just another clueless wife saying goodbye to her loving husband. I watched him step out the door, the final act of a man who thought he had won. And then I locked it behind him. I moved swiftly. The moment I heard his car pull out of the driveway, I grabbed my phone and logged into my security dashboard. Every charge he made pinged in real time, the notifications stacking up like evidence in a trial. $14,000 wired to a personal travel agent. $2,500 in a last-minute shopping spree. A $900 bottle of whiskey from duty-free. I could see it so clearly, him walking through the airport, feeling untouchable, soaking in the illusion of freedom. I let him have it for now. Rebecca called just as I settled onto the couch, laptop open, fingers flying over the keyboard. "He's in the air," I said before she could even ask. "Damn," she whistled. "I almost feel bad for him." I smirked. "Almost." She chuckled. "Okay, so here's where our divorce papers are ready. We've got enough evidence to prove financial fraud. The FBI contact is standing by, and your accounts are locked down tighter than Fort Knox. By the time he tries to access anything, he'll realize he has nothing." I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Perfect." Rebecca hesitated. "Madeline, you sure you don't want to pull the plug now? Just cut him off before he even lands?" I understood the question. But this wasn't just about cutting him off. It was about making sure he felt the fall. "No," I said. "He needs to believe he's won first. Let him check into the hotel. Let him order the most expensive champagne, rent the sports car, tip the concierge like he owns the place. Let him revel in it. And then we take it all away." Rebecca exhaled. "You're ruthless. I've had a good teacher," I said dryly. We ended the call, and I sat there for a long moment, letting the weight of it all settle. Years of deception, years of making excuses, brushing off red flags, convincing myself I was overreacting. I had spent so much time hoping he'd change, hoping there was something salvageable beneath the lies. But last night had erased any doubt. He wasn't just a liar, he was a thief. And thieves deserved consequences. I refreshed my screen. Another alert: $25,000 for a private yacht rental. Good. Let him drown himself in his own arrogance. I poured myself a glass of wine, savoring the quiet victory humming in my veins. By the time he landed, by the time he strutted through customs like a king arriving at his castle, his entire world would already be slipping through his fingers. And the best part? He wouldn't even see it coming. Jordan landed in Dubai without a care in the world. I imagined him striding through the airport, his sunglasses perched on his head, rolling his designer suitcase behind him, thinking he was finally free. Free from responsibilities, free from me, free to live the high life he always thought he deserved. He probably stretched his arms, exhaling in satisfaction as he stepped into the warm, luxurious air of the city he thought would be his playground. I let him have that moment. I watched in real time as he burned through my money. The notifications flooded in like clockwork. $3,200 for an airport car service he hadn't even bothered with a standard taxi. No, he needed a blacked-out SUV, the kind that made him feel important. $18,000 for the hotel suite ocean view, of course. I pictured him tossing his bags onto the king-sized bed, running his fingers over the silk sheets, soaking in the reality of his success. He thought he had pulled off the perfect crime, that I was at home, completely unaware of what he had done. He had no idea. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee as I pulled up the security dashboard. Every single charge he made was being logged, flagged, and tracked. I had set up notifications for every transaction. Nothing over $100 would go unnoticed. And soon, very soon, he'd realized that he had walked straight into my trap. I imagined him standing at the balcony of his 5-star suite, gazing over the glittering city, maybe already planning what he'd do next. A club? A private yacht party? Maybe a shopping spree for whatever mistress he had lined up? He probably smirked to himself, sipping an expensive cocktail, thinking about how easy it had been to fool me. That was the thing about Jordan, he always underestimated me. I let him continue spending. I needed him to. The more he indulged, the more evidence I had. The deeper he sank, the harder the fall would be. He had no idea that his so-called dream trip had already begun its descent into a nightmare. I refreshed the dashboard. Another transaction. $9,500 luxury watch boutique. I nearly laughed. Of course, Jordan always needed a trophy, something to flaunt, something to prove he was better than everyone else. I imagined him slipping the watch onto his wrist, admiring the way it looked against his skin, feeling like a man who had truly made it. God, he had no clue. I picked up my phone, dialing Rebecca. She answered on the second ring. "He's living large," I said, tapping my nails against the desk. She chuckled. "Let me guess. First-class meals, designer brands, and an overpriced rental car?" "Close," I said. "Private driver, 5-star suite, and a watch worth more than my first car." Rebecca whistled. "Wow. He's really going all in, huh?" "That's exactly what I want," I murmured. "The bigger he goes, the harder he crashes." There was a pause on her end before she said, "You ready for the next step?" I glanced at my screen, watching as yet another transaction popped up. This one was big, $15,000. I clicked for details. A high-end reservation at one of Dubai's most exclusive restaurants. Perfect. I exhaled, feeling the satisfaction coil deep in my stomach. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "It's time." Rebecca grinned. "All right, let's pull the plug." I clicked the final command, locking every single account, freezing every asset, shutting down every financial avenue he had. And then I sat back and waited for the storm to hit. I pictured it perfectly. Jordan, seated at the extravagant restaurant, a glass of aged whiskey in hand, exuding the smug confidence of a man who thought he had the world wrapped around his finger. He was always the type to lean back in his chair, flash that cocky grin, and act like he owned the place. I imagined him tapping his watch, his brand new, stolen luxury watch, against the table as he skimmed the menu, probably bragging to the waiter about his refined taste. He had always been like that, loud, overconfident, completely unaware of when he was about to hit a wall at full speed. And that wall? It was coming. Fast. I leaned back in my own chair, sipping on my wine, thousands of miles away, watching it all unfold in real time. The first alert came in. Transaction denied, $15,000 at Le Ciel, Dubai. I let the moment settle, the weight of it pressing in, knowing exactly what was happening on his end. I pictured the waiter returning with the bill, standing patiently as Jordan reached for his wallet. still grinning like he had all the money in the world. He'd probably slide the card across the table with a lazy flick of his wrist, barely paying attention. Because why would he? In his mind, he had just successfully pulled off the greatest scam of his life. Then, the pause, the subtle shift in the waiter's posture, the tiny flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Jordan wouldn't notice at first, too busy scrolling through his phone, basking in the illusion of his victory. But then, the words he never expected to hear. "I'm sorry, sir, but your card has been declined." Just like that, the first crack in his little fantasy. He'd blink, sit up a little straighter. "That can't be right," he'd say, forcing a chuckle. "Run it again." The waiter, ever polite, would nod and try again. Another decline. Jordan's jaw would tighten. His smile would falter just a fraction. He'd pull out another card, forcing that easy charm back into his voice. "Try this one." Declined. He wouldn't be laughing anymore. I swirled my wine, watching as more alerts came in, one after the other. $3,200 denied. $2,100 denied. $850 denied. He was scrambling now, trying different cards, different amounts, anything to keep up the illusion, to stop reality from slamming into him full force. But reality didn't care about his ego. I imagined the murmurs spreading through the restaurant, the way the other diners would start stealing glances at him, the way the waiter, still polite but now more cautious, would shift his weight from foot to foot. Jordan had never handled embarrassment well. He was the type who needed to be admired, who needed people to believe he was someone important. And now? Now he was just another fraud exposed in real time. He'd clear his throat, forcing another smile as he reached for his phone. "Must be a banking issue," he'd say, waving a hand. "I'll sort it out in a second." Then he'd dial. And that was when it would really hit him, because there was no sorting this out. By now, his accounts weren't just frozen, they were gone. The emergency funds he thought he could fall back on, wiped out. The credit lines he had relied on for years, closed. Every single financial escape route had been severed. And the worst part? He had no idea how. I watched the alert slow, then stop. A long pause. And then, finally, one last attempt. $200. Emergency withdrawal attempt. Denied. That was it. That was the moment. The second Jordan realized he was stranded, broke, and completely, utterly alone. I set my wine glass down, exhaling slowly. Checkmate. I imagined him standing outside the restaurant, his phone clutched tightly in his hand, his fingers tapping furiously against the screen as he scrolled through his banking app. He was probably sweating now, his heart pounding, his mind racing for answers. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had planned everything so perfectly right down to the last stolen cent. And yet, here he was, standing in the middle of Dubai, surrounded by wealth, luxury, and opulence, with no way to pay for any of it. I took a slow sip of my coffee, watching the real-time alerts flash across my laptop screen. Every failed transaction, every declined card, every last-ditch attempt to regain control, it was all there. He was trying everything now, grasping at straws. ATM withdrawal denied. Hotel charge denied. Wire transfer attempt denied. He had officially run out of options. I pictured the moment he realized it, when the denial wasn't just some minor inconvenience, but an unshakable, inescapable reality. The moment the weight of it all finally came crashing down. His hands tightening around his phone, his jaw clenching, his throat dry. I could see him checking his pockets, as if suddenly expecting cash to appear. But there was nothing. No more cards. No more money. No more escape. For the first time in his life, Jordan was well and truly stuck. I leaned back, savoring the moment. I had spent years cleaning up his messes, making excuses for him, pretending not to see the red flags. But this was different. This wasn't just karma. This was calculated. Every single move he had made had led him right here, to this exact moment, and he had no idea how or when he lost control. And that was the best part. I could imagine his desperation growing by the second, the frustration twisting into something darker. He was the type of man who thrived on control, on making people believe he was someone he wasn't. But now, he was nothing. Just another broke, stranded fool in a city that didn't care about his sob story. His first instinct would be to call someone to try to fix this before anyone realized just how bad it was. Maybe his banker, maybe the airline, maybe even one of his so-called friends back home, the ones who had always been happy to party on his dime. But I knew exactly what would happen next. Call to bank disconnected. Call to credit card company disconnected. Call to friends ignored. Nobody was coming to save him. I smirked, knowing exactly what he was about to do. He was going to call me. And right on cue, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Jordan. I let it ring, once, twice. Then I declined the call. A few seconds later, a text popped up. Madeline, call me. It's urgent. I stared at the message for a long moment, rolling my thumb over the screen, considering my next move. Then, slowly, deliberately, I typed my response. Figure it out. And just like that, I hit send. I could only imagine his reaction. The moment he saw those two words, the way his stomach must have dropped, the way his hands must have started shaking, because in that instant, he knew. He knew I wasn't coming to save him. He knew this wasn't just some temporary inconvenience. This was permanent. This was intentional. And he had walked straight into it. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Game over. I stared at my phone, watching as the read receipt popped up beneath my last message. Figure it out. Just 2 words, but I knew they had hit him like a freight train. For the first time, Jordan was seeing me not as the soft, forgiving wife he had always relied on, but as someone who had finally, irreversibly cut him off. And yet, the calls kept coming. 3 missed calls, 5, 10, then the texts. Madeline, please pick up. I'm serious. I need you to call me. Something's wrong with my cards. Fix this. This isn't funny. I have nothing here. I exhaled slowly, tapping my nails against the kitchen counter as I scrolled through his increasingly frantic messages. I could see him now, pacing inside the airport, sweat beading at his temples, gripping his phone like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. Maybe he had already tried begging the airline for a ticket on credit. Maybe he had argued with the concierge at the hotel, demanding they make an exception. But Dubai didn't work like that. Money talked here, and Jordan had just been silenced. I took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the moment. Then another text. Madeline, I know you did this. Call me. I smiled. There it was. The moment of realization. The second the illusion shattered and he understood this wasn't a mistake. This was me. I let the message sit unread, untouched, watching the little typing, bubble appear and disappear over and over again. He was spiraling now, fumbling for control, searching for a way out. But there was none. I imagined him in the terminal, sitting stiffly on one of those uncomfortable airport chairs, his mind racing through possibilities. He'd check his wallet again, just in case, thumb through his empty cards, tap them against his palm, maybe even try swiping one at a vending machine just to see. But the reality wouldn't change. No money, no flight home, no way out. His breath would come quicker now, his hands a little unsteady, his confidence cracking, piece by piece. This was a man who had always landed on his feet. No matter how reckless, no matter how selfish, Jordan had always found a way to scrape by. A lie here, a manipulation there. He had spent years perfecting the art of taking from others, always assuming there'd be another sucker waiting to save him. But this time, the only person left was me, and I was done saving him. I could almost hear his voice in my head, that arrogant, too smooth tone shifting into something uglier. He was angry now, furious. Not at himself, of course. Jordan never took responsibility for anything. No, he'd blame me. He'd convince himself that I was the villain, that I had set him up, that I had betrayed him, as if stealing from me hadn't been the real betrayal. I let my phone vibrate one last time before finally switching it to silent. Then, for the first time in years, I let myself breathe. The weight that had pressed on my chest for so long, the endless, suffocating cycle of excuses, lies, and manipulation, it was gone. Jordan had spent our entire marriage draining me, financially and emotionally, treating me like a resource instead of a person. But now, for the first time, I was free. I closed my laptop, pushed my coffee aside, and stood up, stretching my arms above my head. The day was bright outside, the city humming with life, and for once I had nowhere to be but exactly where I wanted. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, Jordan was stranded in a foreign country with nothing but his own bad decisions to keep him company. And that was justice. I leaned back in my chair, staring at my phone, watching as the notifications piled up. Missed calls, voicemails, texts that started as demands, then turned into pleas, then finally into something that almost resembled desperation. He was breaking down. I knew it. I could feel it. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the familiar urge to fix it. Jordan had always been a man who thrived on control. Even when he wasn't the one holding the power, he manipulated situations until he was the one steering them. But not this time. This time, the wheel had been yanked from his hands, and he was careening toward a disaster of his own making. I could almost picture him pacing outside the Dubai airport, his jaw clenched, his fingers tapping against his phone, trying to calculate his next move. He had probably already approached the airline desk again, maybe even demanded to speak to a supervisor, throwing around empty threats about lawsuits or calling the U.S. Embassy. But none of it mattered, because his money was gone, his access was cut off, and he had no one left to bail him out. A new message popped up on my screen. Madeline, I swear to God, just call me. I'm serious. You don't understand what's happening here. I laughed softly, shaking my head. I understood perfectly. Another message followed. I'm out of cash. I can't even get a cab to a hotel. I just need you to unblock one card. One. Just so I can figure something out. Please. There it was. The first real crack. Jordan never asked for help. Not really. He manipulated, he coerced, he guilt-tripped. But he never begged. And this was close. I tapped my finger against the screen, considering my options. I could answer. I could listen to the panic in his voice, let him squirm, let him throw out excuse after excuse, trying to convince me that this was all some horrible misunderstanding. Or I could let him stew in it, let him sit in the chaos he created. A slow smirk curled at the corner of my lips as I set my phone down and reached for my coffee. He had stranded me in financial hell for years, maxing out my cards, draining my savings, lying straight to my face while he spent my hard-earned money on his fantasies. Now he was stranded. I refreshed my security dashboard, watching as another denied transaction flashed across the screen. Jordan Miller, attempted hotel charge, declined. Another one followed. Jordan Miller, ATM withdrawal attempt, denied. He was trying everything now. My stomach twisted not with guilt, but with a slow, burning satisfaction. I had spent years drowning in the chaos of his lies, convincing myself that he would change, that the man I had fallen in love with was still buried somewhere underneath the recklessness and deceit. But last night, standing in the dark, watching him steal from me, I had finally seen the truth. Jordan wasn't a good man who made bad choices. He was just a bad man. And now, for the first time, he was out of options. I took another sip of my coffee, letting the quiet settle over me. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Jordan was spiraling. I woke up to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window, warm against my skin, the quiet hum of the city outside. I stretched, my muscles loose, my mind clearer than it had been in years. There was a stillness in the air, a weight that had lifted, and for the first time, I felt it freedom. No more checking my accounts in the middle of the night, heart pounding. No more holding my breath every time my phone buzzed with an unknown charge. No more wondering where my money had gone, who he had spent it on, or what excuse he'd come up with next. Jordan was gone. Not physically, not yet, but financially, emotionally, he no longer had his claws in me. And he never would again. I rolled over, grabbed my phone from the nightstand, and glanced at the screen. The notifications had slowed. The last one had come in at 3:42 am. Madeline, please. I have nothing. I don't even have a place to sleep. Just talk to me. I stared at it for a moment, then swiped left, deleting it without hesitation. It was over. Jordan wasn't my problem anymore. I sat up, letting my feet touch the hardwood floor, the cool sensation grounding me. I stretched my arms above my head, taking a deep breath. Today was the first day of the rest of my life, and I knew exactly how I wanted to start it. I walked into the kitchen, the familiar routine of making coffee, bringing a small smile to my face. The apartment was quiet, not empty, just mine. I poured my cup, took a slow sip, and reached for my laptop. There was just one last thing left to do. I logged into my financial dashboard, scanning the accounts that were once tangled with Jordan's name. Everything was clean now. Every last penny of mine was protected, every trace of his existence scrubbed from my life. But there was one more tab I needed to check. I clicked on my security alerts and scrolled down. Dubai International Airport. Denied transaction. 11:32 p.m. Dubai International Airport. Denied transaction. 11:47 p.m. Dubai International Airport. Declined flight purchase. 12:15 am. He was trying to get out, and he couldn't. I let out a quiet breath, picturing it. Jordan, standing at the airport desk, his wallet empty, his accounts frozen, his charm no longer enough to save him. I imagined the panic in his voice, the way his fingers would tighten around his useless credit card, the beads of sweat forming at his temple as he realized for the first time in his life there was no way out. And I had done that. I picked up my phone, dialed Rebecca, and she answered on the second ring. "Morning," she said, sounding way too awake for this early. "How does it feel to be free?" I smiled, sipping my coffee. "Not bad. You? Better now that I have news," she said. "You sitting down?" I leaned against the counter. "Hit me." Rebecca exhaled, dramatic as always. Interpol flagged him. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Oh yeah," she continued, sounding entirely too delighted. Apparently, the fraud triggered some international security flags, and since he tried using the stolen funds overseas, it got bumped up. He's officially on a no-fly list until the investigation is closed. I set my coffee down, my fingers tightening around the mug. "So, he's stuck there?" "Stuck?" she confirmed. "No flights, no money, no way home." I let out a slow breath, my pulse steady. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt something, but I didn't. Jordan had stolen from me, lied to me, used me, and now he was paying the price. "Madeline," Rebecca said, "softer now. You won." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting those words settle over me. I won. Not just because he was suffering, not just because he had lost everything, but because, for the first time in years, I had my life back. I exhaled, opened my eyes, and smiled. "Yeah," I said. "I did." Jordan thought he was untouchable. Now, he's stranded halfway across the world, broke, humiliated, and with no way home. The same man who stole from me is now begging for help. But here's the real question. Would you have helped him or left him to suffer the consequences of his own actions? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you loved this ultimate revenge story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because, trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Trust is valuable, but blind trust is dangerous. I learned the hard way that even those closest to you can betray you when money is involved. Financial security isn't just about saving, it's about protecting what's yours. Always monitor your accounts, set alerts, and never assume someone has your best interests at heart. If something feels off, don't ignore it. Investigate. Ask questions. Because in this country, financial fraud ruins lives every day, often by the people we least expect. Stay sharp, stay protected, and never let anyone take advantage of your hard work.